All right, let's just jump right in, shall we? Today, we're exploring the absolutely fascinating neuroscience behind how specific physical gestures can completely bypass spoken language to build profound trust and emotional intimacy. If you've ever wondered why words sometimes just kind of fall flat, well, the science we're about to unpack is going to completely change how you view human connection.
3 seconds, literally 1, 2, 3. According to the research we're looking at today, that is all the time it takes for a single intentional touch to flood the human brain with enough oxytocin to create an emotional bond that lasts for hours. We're not talking about poetry here. This is hard, biological science happening in real time.
But it makes you wonder, can a 3-second touch actually replace 1,000 words? Think about it. For a mature partner, someone who's already heard every compliment, read every sweet text, and sat through every perfectly rehearsed romantic speech, words often lose their punch over time. They just stop impressing. And this makes us realize that intentional touch isn't just a nice alternative. It's often the far superior communicator.
There's this incredibly cool study conducted by Dr. Datcher Keltner at UC Berkeley that proves exactly this. So, strangers were asked to communicate emotions strictly through brief touches on the forearm. No words, no facial expressions allowed whatsoever. And the results? People accurately conveyed really complex emotions like gratitude, sympathy, and love almost 80% of the time. As the source material points out, your mouth wishes it could be that effective.
Now, just to be totally clear here, we are not talking about those ineffective, clumsy movie-style grabs or, awkward teenage mall handholding. The real secret to this kind of connection is intentional touch. We're talking about psychologically powerful, biologically supported gestures that communicate safety, confidence, and desire, all without you having to say a single word. All right, let's get into phase 1, creating safety and presence. This is where we start our intimacy escalator with some really solid foundational gestures.
The very first one is what we call the slow lower back guide. And hey, this isn't just about good manners. The lower back contains this massive cluster of nerve endings that are directly wired to the brain's emotional processing centers. But listen, speed and pressure matter enormously here. A quick pat, that feels like something a weird uncle does at Thanksgiving. And a heavy push just feels controlling. But a slow, steady, warm palm, that bypasses logic entirely and speaks directly to the nervous system.
By giving that gentle, totally unhurried pressure, you're actually triggering a deep protective bonding response. It makes a partner feel profoundly chosen. For a mature partner who is incredibly used to carrying the weight of the world on her own shoulders, someone who's had to be her own protector for years, this gesture offers immense relief. It basically whispers, you don't have to carry everything alone right now.
Moving on to touch number 2, the two-handed handhold. Again, we are way beyond basic hand-holding here. This is when you take a partner's hand and actually cradle it with both of yours. It offers this powerful, undeniable contrast to the half-hearted affection or distracted presence they might be used to. Like a partner whose body is at the dinner table but whose mind is a million miles away on their phone.
The secret sauce here is something called bilateral stimulation. When both of your hands wrap around hers, it creates symmetrical sensory input. This technique is actually utilized heavily in EMDR trauma therapy to help people process emotional trauma. So, when you do this, you are quite literally sending a clinical-grade signal to her brain that she is safe and that you are fully, completely present. It practically screams to her brain that you are different from the rest.
Okay, phase 2. Building vulnerability and trust. Once you've established that crucial baseline of safety, we can step things up.
Touch number 3 is one that actually catches a lot of people totally off guard, the forehead touch. Gently pressing your forehead against hers, with your eyes closed, without speaking or rushing to escalate it into something else. Dr. Sue Johnson, a really prominent relationship researcher, calls these potent bonding moments. They activate the adult attachment system the exact same way a mother's touch activates it in infants. It demands a high level of vulnerability because you simply can't do this from across a room. You have to let your guard down and just be there.
Then we have touch number 4, the back of the neck touch. The biology happening behind the scenes here is just wild. The nape of the neck is incredibly sensitive and vulnerable. When touched, the brain runs a rapid-fire evaluation. Am I safe? Do I trust this person? Does this feel good? If trust is already established, this gentle touch triggers a simultaneous spike in arousal and connection through a perfect tandem release of dopamine and oxytocin. That is literally the exact neurochemical cocktail responsible for romantic attachment. But remember, timing is everything. This is a progression. absolutely not a shortcut.
Which brings us to phase 3, subtle signals of bonding. These are those magical gestures that operate almost completely below the level of conscious thought.
Touch number 5 is described in the source material as practically being a psychological cheat code. It is the thumb stroke. This is a slow, rhythmic thumb stroke against the skin while you're already holding hands or resting your hand on an arm or knee. You don't announce it, you don't stare down at it, you just do it absent-mindedly while talking about something completely ordinary.
The science behind this cheat code is so cool. Researchers over at the University of Gothenburg in Sweden found that this specific, slow stroking activates C-tactile afferents. These are specific nerve fibers directly wired to the brain's insular cortex, which is the area that processes feelings of intimacy and emotional closeness. You are literally tricking the brain into feeling profound intimacy because the gesture feels so wonderfully unconscious and natural, rather than calculated or performative.
Touch 6 is the silent pull. This is wordlessly reaching over and gently drawing a partner closer to you, maybe just closing the gap on the couch or putting an arm around a shoulder. No grand announcements, no underlying agenda to initiate anything else. You pull them close simply because the physical distance between you just felt wrong.
This action is heavily grounded in attachment theory, specifically a concept known as proximity seeking. A securely attached partner instinctively desires to reduce physical distance. For a mature woman who may have spent years feeling like she had to constantly earn closeness by being accommodating or attractive enough, this rewrites a deeply exhausting narrative. It shows her, undeniably, that she is wanted simply for her presence, just for existing next to you.
Finally, we arrive at phase 4, the biological stress reset, the absolute peak of our intimacy escalator.
This ultimate gesture is the 20-second hug. And let's be real, we are not talking about a quick squeeze or a one-armed buddy pat. No, this is a full, both arms wrapped, chest-to-chest embrace that lasts for a very specific minimum of 20 unhurried seconds.
So, why exactly 20 seconds? Well, research from the journal Psychoneuroendocrinology shows that this exact duration triggers a massive biological cascade. First, oxytocin flows. Second, cortisol, that pesky stress hormone, plummets. Third, the heart rate physically slows down. And fourth, the entire nervous system shifts from sympathetic fight-or-flight activation into a deep, restorative parasympathetic rest. You are literally reducing their stress at a fundamental biological level.
Dr. John Gottman, who's been researching relationships for over 4 decades, points out that prolonged physical holding is an incredibly effective tool for rebuilding trust. This isn't just a metaphor or a feel-good suggestion, it's a clinically supported intervention that is often prescribed to couples in crisis. For someone who has spent years holding herself together through heartbreak or loss, a hug like this gives a fiercely independent person the biological and emotional permission to finally stop holding everything together and just soften.
So these 7 touches, they can literally rewrite a relationship's emotional biology. It's powerful stuff. But it does leave us with one final, pretty provocative question to chew on. You now know how to touch to create this bond. But do you know how to read the subtle unconscious signals that someone actually wants this closeness in the first place? Because honestly, if you miss the signs that she is already falling, even the best techniques in the world won't matter. Just something to keep in the back of your mind as you step out into the real world. Thanks so much for joining this explainer.